Hello everyone, Harry Baldock here, editor for Total Telecom. We're here on day 2 of Connected North. It's still very busy. I'm really delighted to be joined by Richard Tang, the chairman of Zen Internet. Richard, how's your morning been so far?
Really good, actually. I've got a new job as well. I'm now the CEO of Zen. I was the chair, but from the 1st of April I'm the CEO. Yeah, but really good morning. Interesting sessions. Interesting discussion about connecting northern communities that I was involved in. I particularly enjoyed the discussion about Equinox 2 because as an internet service provider, we are very pro Equinox 2. We think that we can sort of see the view of the altnet community, but we totally disagree with it, and actually we think that it's a lot of noise just to delay what is effectively free market competition. I think the allegations that there is anti-competitive behaviour in play from Openreach is just a load of rubbish, to be honest, and hopefully Ofcom will come to the same conclusion.
Do you think Ofcom's kind of in a rock and a hard place situation here? I feel like almost regardless of their decision, there's going to be a large portion of the kind of broadband community that's going to be very annoyed, potentially even launching legal challenges. How do you think they should do this? How do they make the most balanced opinion, I suppose?
Well, I think in February they gave an indication that they were not going to intervene, and they delayed the introduction of Equinox 2 now for a couple of months while they do a review. And I guess if I was in their shoes, there is a lot of pressure. There's pressure from the altnet community as a whole. There's pressure from Inca, and so I guess they felt that it was prudent to do a proper review, and look, if I was in their shoes, maybe I'd be doing the same thing. However, I think if they look at the reality of the situation, that Equinox 2 is, and as with Equinox 1, is not stopping the altnet build. I mean, the amount of capital that's going into altnet builds is still significant, and the altnets are still building. And as I said in my fireside chat discussion, Zen Internet is such a good example of how that free market competition is working. We have a partnership with Openreach, but we also have a partnership with City Fibre. And despite Equinox, we are preferring to place business with the altnet. So if Equinox was If Ofcom decided to put the brakes on Equinox, all it would do is increase our input costs, and that gives us this dilemma of, well, what do? We either really squeeze our margins and absorb it, which actually we wouldn't be in a position to do. So the only other option is we put all our prices up to our customers. So actually Ofcom is it's doing the opposite of what it wants to achieve, which is getting a fair deal for consumers. By halting Equinox 2, it's just going to result in big price increases for the consumers, because the reality of the networks today is that there's so many millions and millions of customers where Openreach is the only option today. And as I say, the pricing of the altnets is such that with Equinox or without Equinox, free market competition is working. And if I think about what Ofcom wants, the ideal situation for the regulator going all the way back to the 90s is infrastructure competition and free market competition. Ofcom's stated goal has always been that regulation is a stopgap until free market competition comes along, and to stop the incumbent from abusing its significant market power. It's wanted that for 30 years. In the 2020s decade, it's finally getting that free market competition in full fibre, which means it can continue to scale back the level of regulation, and we've been seeing that over the last decade. So my message is, okay, fair deal altnets, you've had a go, but this is a free market, this is not anti-competitive behaviour, let's let free market competition play out, let's let the regulator have minimal impact on the market. And many commentators over the years have said that is the best way for a market to work, with minimal regulation and proper free market competition.
And what do you think that means for market dynamics going forward? Obviously in the last few years we've seen something like £50 billion being thrown into to kind of fibre in the UK. And obviously that's led to over 100 altnets rising up. Now maybe the investment environment's not quite so exciting, so vibrant, and everything's maybe moving towards consolidation. What do you think the kind of market will look like in, say, 5 years' time?
So 2028, first of all, I think there's not going to be 100 altnets. There's going to be far fewer. And the altnet game has got three outcomes for an altnet. It's get big, so that's City Fibre's strategy, for example. It's get bought, and there's a lot of altnets that you almost get a sense that the big reason that they're building so fast is they just want to get bought. That is their end goal. Get acquired, the investors and the founders get a good payout, thank you very much, or go bust. And I think the go bust is I mean, we've seen it recently actually with Zyber. They've got into financial difficulty. They put a lot of money into building full fibre and into acquiring customers, and so the challenge for some altnets is if they build in an area that gets overbuilt, particularly if it gets overbuilt by Openreach, then what started off being a very precious asset with, your choice is 1 meg with ADSL or FTTC, or you can get a gig with full fibre. All of a sudden you're competing with the likes of the big four broadband providers, with Zen and with all the CPs that interconnect with Openreach. So those are the three outcomes. So 2028, very much consolidated market. And for me, it mirrors what happened in the early days of the internet, where Zen was one of maybe 100 little ISPs that had popped up all over the country, and then over time all our competitors disappeared until it seemed like there was pretty much only us and a couple of others left. And I think we'll see the same again in the altnet world. Of course, what I'm hoping is there'll be a sufficient number of altnets that we do maintain that true free market competition. I do believe that will be the case.
And the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on, you mentioned in your panel earlier about the difficulty of sometimes integrating with these altnets, and especially if they don't have the scale, it sometimes not be worth it. And you kind of suggested a solution to this might be the creation of some kind of open platform that all the altnets use, and therefore you can just use a single API to kind of get access to the network and do what you need to do. How do you think that would kind of play out in the market? Like, what would you be looking for in a platform like that?
So I was talking to a couple of guys from Freedom Fibre. They've got this concept for something they're calling AnaNet, and it's just that. It's this idea of aggregating multiple smaller altnets and maybe some bigger ones as well, so that a service provider like Zen can integrate and build a service relationship with one entity. In this case, it would be AnaNet, and then they deal with all the different interfaces to all the different altnets. And that would get over the issue that I highlighted in the discussion, that if an altnet comes to us today and says, hey, great Zen, we built 100,000 premises and we've got this great ambition, we've got all this funding, do you want to integrate with us as a wholesale customer so you can start selling our service to your retail customers? And the answer is, it's just not worth our while, because with that scale of build, the overhead of integrating not just order placement but service management, regrades, cancellations, fault logging, all these are processes that take a lot of effort and investment to establish, and then there's training of all our people to use these systems. So for 100,000 premises, just not worth our while. But if we had a platform that aggregated multiple altnets and gave us millions of premises, that's much, much more interesting. I think the challenge that Freedom Fibre and AnaNet will have, as I said to them, is a bit of a chicken and egg. At the moment, it's a proof of concept. I don't want to start interconnecting with a proof of concept. I want to interconnect with something that's got millions of end users there. So there is that big sort of hurdle, that chicken and egg situation. But I think it's a good idea, and if they can make a success of AnaNet, or if someone else can make a success of something similar to that, then it would allow a provider like Zen to access these smaller networks. I mean, one thing that we've seen that we're actually already benefiting from is City Fibre's approach of not just acquiring smaller complementary altnets, but also partnering with them, so that the service relationship that we already have with City Fibre, through that we can access other altnets. So right as today, my preference would be altnets partner with City Fibre, and then we access their network through the City Fibre platform. Longer term, if there's a third-party option, yes, we'll consider it, but the scale needs to be there.
Is this maybe a way of for the altnets to kind of stave off the inevitable and kind of keep going a bit more by kind of bundling themselves with the other altnets?
Yeah, absolutely. I think longer term though, even with a platform like that, I've got to question whether the model is sustainable. Back to your question about what's 2028 going to look like. I can't imagine a aggregated platform with 20, 30, 40 little altnets. Because they're going to, they're still going to be subject to that same market dynamic of we're not big enough to get big, so we've either got to sell or we're going to go bust. And so I think that there's the risk of the aggregate platform. Even if it could get to 20 or 30 altnets, I think they'd get to a point where you start seeing the number of altnets starting to come down as some of them disappear, some of them get bought. So big challenge. But I mean, look, the 2020s decade, it's the decade of full fibre and all this money going into it. The investors know it's like the Wild West. Everyone's hoping to strike gold. Some of them will, and some of them will just have a bucket full of soil. And that's the game that everyone's playing. And some will win and some will lose. I hope everyone does as well as they can do.
Richard, it's always great to speak to you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Harry.